Our next speaker is Professor Hicham Safieddine.
مساء الخير. Don't be scared, it means good evening in Arabic. They're investigating the word intifada somewhere in North Vancouver because it's a hate crime to put that word on your lawn. Students are the beating heart of university life. They are also the weather vane of social change and political transformation. In class and on campus, students, both undergraduate and graduate, must be afforded the safety and support they are entitled to. This is more so in the case where they are vulnerable because they hold political views or have marginalized identities. And here I would say quite the opposite. They hold progressive views, not abhorrent views. Since October 7, students of all backgrounds and faiths and around the world have been standing up for justice in Palestine. And they are paying a heavy price for it, thanks to the anti-democratic and anti-Palestinian policies and practices of university administrations and of state, this is in the case of the United States, or provincial, in the case of Canada, and federal governments. What we are witnessing at UBC is part of this larger context, and I can't stress this enough, because a lot of times when we try to explain this to some of our colleagues or fellow students, it always boils down to some complicated policy that wants to ignore the larger problem that is sweeping across the global north. Now, I won't have time, obviously, to go through a lot of what's going on, but in Europe, there is a crackdown, and we have seen a wave of demonization and clampdown, including the suspension of students. In the United States, the US is notorious for the intimidation and harassment of students in solidarity with Palestine. After October 7, these tactics have ranged from powerful Zionist businessmen bullying university administrations to expel students, to toppling a university president or two, to banning the posting of statements on departments or college websites, sounds familiar, just like here at UBC, to hateful crimes like the tragic Vermont shooting of Palestinian students shown here on your right. Canada is not immune to this crackdown. According to a 106-page report prepared by independent Jewish voices, a chilly climate in Canada has arisen in relation to free speech on Palestine. The study was based on 77 testimonies of faculty, students, activists, and representatives of organizations that were hailing from Ontario, Manitoba, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Nova Scotia, Quebec, and Alberta. Among the academics responding were representatives of 11 disciplines from 21 Canadian universities. Experience of suppression of speech on Palestine included the following according to the report: political intervention into hiring, attempts to prevent access to venues, the attempted cancellation of public events on Palestine, as well as targeting individual students or faculty or doxing. Now, this report was published in October 2022. Not 2023. So this is 1 year before October 7. But for the Zionists and their allies and some members of our top administration and for Canadian mainstream media, history begins and ends with October 7. Now these same pre-October 7 tactics are being deployed today, except unfortunately on a McCarthyistic scale. There is no shortage today of crackdown on students after October 7. I'm just going to mention a couple of the most outrageous. The first, on your right, is the screening of law students who signed a pro-Palestine letter by the Ontario government. They're screening them to actually filter out their, basically hiring them based on their political views. Another is the audacious call by a non-university body, the Zionist lobby group B'nai B'rith, to expel students. They publicly are calling for the expulsion of students because they're described as terror apologists, quote unquote. Now, whether in Canada or abroad, before or after October 7, prohibiting Palestine takes on different forms and variable force. And I think it's important for all of us to try to conceptualize these, because it'll save us a lot of trouble when we're trying to sift through the plethora of challenges we're facing. The first, discursive discipline, the prescription or even investigation of terms like intifada or from the river to the sea. The fascist prime minister of Israel holds a sign showing from the river to the sea, and it's a government that we have an official relationship with, and no investigation is done, but people calling for the liberation and for full equality of people in Palestine are actually investigated for saying that. So discursive discipline is a very powerful way in which today is being used against pro-Palestine speech. The second is securitization. So room bookings, increased campus policing, calls by the administration to securitize campus rather than use other forms of de-escalation, which includes opening up spaces for debates like this one. That's number two. Intimidation or harassment, whether it's in class or whether it's on campus. I personally witnessed a faculty member in this university trailing students as they're walking across campus and taking photos of them and refusing security requests to leave. I've seen stalls about Israel. I would never go there if they're students, because they are students and I'm faculty. I should respect that relation of power. But they don't, and they're certainly not being investigated. Some of us are being actually prescribed from speaking. Doxing is another which we're all familiar with. Intentional. I didn't know enough about these terms before, so I have a definition, but I think you're ahead of me on this one. I'm still trying to avoid social media as much as I can. So I won't define it. Delegitimation. Erasure of Palestine and Palestinians. Up until today, most administration will refuse to use the word Palestine. The Canada uses it, the UN uses it, our administration says Israel in Gaza, Israel in Gaza, as if, you know, the rest doesn't matter. Censorship, the current incident I'm going to talk about. Obviously, maybe this wasn't explained, I'm focusing on what's happening with students. So my presentation is on students. Demonization, the fake Hamas stickers we're going to talk about. And political interference and indoctrination. My colleague, Dr. Brennan, has spoken about this, but I'm going to speak a bit more about it. So here are some examples. According to testimony by organizers, on November 17, 2023, the event Black Palestinian Transnational Solidarity had 3-room bookings cancelled by UBC officials. The RCMP also made an appearance, according to the testimony. Organizers had to move from one place to another and constantly fend off disruptors. The Cairn incident. The Cairn of political causes. The UBC engineering cairn is a standalone cement structure located on Main Mall. There is an established tradition of students painting messages with a political content on its sides in order to raise awareness, which I think is definitely a good thing. As you can see, the cairn was painted on the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, including the not so political statement, Russia equal terrorist. Now, on November 2nd, 2023, this is during Israel's bloody assault on Gaza, which was well underway. The cairn was painted in solidarity with the Palestinian people. The content including the following statements. Israel is killing children again. This is a fact. UBC is complicit. You can agree or disagree, but it's, just saying it's complicit. There was a Palestinian flag, God forbid, and there were red handprints and a list of social media accounts of journalists in Gaza documenting the horrors of the Israeli assault. And as many of you know, dozens of them, if not more, have actually been killed in the last 3.5 months. So what happens when this is done on the cairn? It's tart, because unlike solidarity with Ukraine, pro-Palestine speech is apparently hateful and must be censored. In the latter case, what happened as well? When 2 racialized female students removed the tarp, they removed the cover, campus security and the RCMP were called on them. Given the danger posed by those 2 students, the UBC should have called in the Canadian military. Unfortunately, it's a tragic situation, but it's gotten to the point of being so farcical. So let's move on to the more serious incident, in my view, but they're both need to be looked into. I want you to contrast this aggressive behavior of calling in the RCMP on 2 racialized female students with the response to the far more dangerous incidents of fake stickers tied to Hilal BC. On November 17, fake malicious stickers were posted around UBC campus bearing the logo and name of the Social Justice Center. The stickers said, "I love Hamas." Photos of the malicious stickers were shamelessly shared by a UBC faculty on social media before confirming them. The faculty member later apologized, but after the fake news had already spread on Twitter. The professor's apology came after Hilal revealed, as it says in this, that what they posted, after they have revealed that the sticker were fabricated by one of their contractors. In its online post, Hilal said that the action of the contractor does not reflect the values of Hilal BC. If so, why doesn't Hilal BC disclose the name of the contractor? If so, why doesn't Hilal BC publicly apologize to SJC? This is long overdue. So I'm going to ask the following question. What are the values of Hilal BC? I would like to know. What you see on your right is not the work of a contractor. This is Hilal BC ascribing hate speech to a banner unfurled by students at the Nest. The banner says, "Israel is committing genocide in Gaza." What counts as hate speech? Raising the alarm about a genocidal war or demonizing those who are doing it? As we know, Israel is currently facing accusations of genocidal intent at the International Court of Justice. And for me, the fact that South Africa is raising this is itself the indictment, regardless of the outcome. The whole world actually is becoming now increasingly aware of what these students, our students, were warning about. In another context, I can assure you the brave students who unfurled this banner and sounded the alarm would have been honored for their moral courage and foresight. Instead, they were castigated. So, what are the values of Hilal BC? While Israeli soldiers drop thousands of tons of bomb on hospitals jammed with the injured, on schools crowded with refugees, on children huddled together in the dark, while these soldiers strip naked captive Palestinian boys and men, wreak havoc and destroy Palestinian homes and belongings, including children's toys, relish on camera, which many of us unfortunately have to see, on a regular basis, the remote detonation of entire neighborhoods or university buildings, desecrate cemeteries and dig up the dead. And for those of you who always just believe the Western media, this has been confirmed by a CNN report, but many of us already know about this. So while this is being done by the Israeli army all the while, what does Hilal BC do more recently? They choose to host an Israeli soldier last week. The soldier was featured earlier by CTV, and they made pro-war statements. Did Hilal consider the impact of the physical presence of a battle-fresh soldier on UBC students who may have lost friends or family members to Israeli shelling, or who may be identified as Palestinian or Arab, or who don visible signs of support for justice in Palestine, or are wearing traditional dress that may be interpreted as such? Did they take these into account? If Hilal's values are pro-peace, why not host a former soldier who is a conscientious objector? I think it's because their testimony, if this conscientious objector would come, it doesn't fit with Hasbara. Hasbara is a long-standing policy of crude propaganda intended to toe the official Israeli line. I'm asking, is Hilal a house of Hasbara? Hilal itself may not wish to self-incriminate, and after all, its mandate, like CIJA, is also clearly pro-Israeli. But this is where we have the right to ask our administration. What about the UBC administration? CTV has identified the soldier as a fourth-year UBC student. Did UBC grant any concessions to a student to join a foreign army engaged in, many have actually been calling genocidal war? And will UBC guarantee that this soldier, or active or non-active at the point, will not commit any acts of post-battle violence against fellow students if he's now on campus? Is UBC aware that students at Columbia have reported recently being sprayed, that was last Friday, on their campus during a rally by a chemical substance by assailants that they believe are tied to the Israeli army? As for the sticker incident, why hasn't UBC disclosed or demanded the disclosure of the name of Hilal's contractor? We keep asking this question, but instead we get these lengthy emails about policies of complaints, how you want to complain. Is that not part of UBC's duty of care towards its students? The removal of a tarp by students warrants calling in the RCMP, but links to fraudulent and malicious stickers that may constitute criminal defamation do not? This brings us to an important point for us to think about as we move forward. What is the relationship of UBC to Hilal BC? And I have serious questions here. And many of us are asking these questions because we are frustrated with the UBC's lack of action. First, is Hilal a private entity? And if so, why is it granted such authority on campus? Or is Hilal bound by UBC regulations? And if so, why hasn't it been held accountable? This or that? Or does Hilal enjoy the privilege of a de facto dual status, simultaneously off and on campus, which, if you ask me, is a perfect formula for impunity? So even more recently, there was denial of entry of some students, which we wouldn't do here, under the, at least what I saw on social media, under the pretext of this is a private event. So you're active on campus, but then you're private. You have, we say in Arabic, some people with oil, some people with like lard. Some, that may be bad translation, but that's what it is. So here is what we know for a fact. Fact 1, according to Canadian Jewish News, Hilal BC inaugurated the construction of a $7 million new center on campus in 2009. This was made possible by UBC's agreement to extend Hilal's lease, any guess until when? All the way until 2084. What? This is according to the Canadian Jewish News. I'm quoting them. So they are on UBC property and they have a 73-year concession. Any student groups has that? Fact 2. After October 7, Hilal thanked UBC campus security and admin for, and I'm quoting, working closely with us to ensure the safety of our student community, unquote. What about SJC and other students? Does their safety matter? And I'm asking this because I want to ask, given that they're working closely with them, why did UBC fail to draw on this close relationship with Hilal to get the latter to disclose the contractor's name? Or is this cooperation a one-way street? Fact 3, Hilal representatives, as you can see as well, were granted an audience with the newly appointed UBC president, Benoit Antoine Baker. And he met with them on his first day on the job, according to these reports. Also, the president, according to the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver, has responded to their letter in a matter of days in November. Actually, I just, they've, according to the website, they've printed the letter as an email publicly, sent from the president. That's how, carefree they are. Meanwhile, we have to think before every email we send for not being accused of all sorts of things. So, the president actually, according to this letter that's published on the website, I'm quoting them, this is not me, it says that the president in the letter says, will discuss this issue with the deans. They're going to discuss the role of the classroom during political conflict and the importance of open, principled, and balanced debate. He's telling them as well that he will be working with the executive to determine the proper response to challenges across the spectrum of behavior during this conflict. This is all about a political conflict. So they can talk politics, but we can't. By contrast, the President's office has yet to respond to a letter sent in October and signed by over 1,000 faculty, staff, and students. We have yet to hear from them, but they are responding to these non-UBC entities before they even So I want to get to the larger question of political interference in education, which is what we are actually facing in all of this. The high-profile access of pro-Israeli and Zionist groups to teaching governance is not restricted to UBC or Hillel BC. BC Cabinet Minister of Post-Secondary Education, which was mentioned before, Selina Robinson, I'm repeating what Brenna said, has been in daily conversation with CIJA. I also should point out that on November 5 in 2023, last November, and while speaking at a B'nai B'rith event, Robinson also said that CIJA is a partner when it comes to planning Holocaust education. On November 10, I don't think I have a slide on this one. On November 10, Michael Mostyn, the CEO of B'nai B'rith Canada, which I mentioned called for the expulsion of students, told CBC, and I'm quoting, "Teachers have to be very particular about how they present the material about the Holocaust to students who are growing up in a world of social media where anti-Semitic falsehoods are rampant." Unquote. So my question is, what does being particular mean? Will it mean adopting the discredited era definition of anti-Semitism? B'nai B'rith, this is the same organization this person is the CEO of, has openly advocated for era and applauded its endorsement by Canadian legislatures. Last September, by the way, following the scandal of honoring a Ukrainian Nazi in parliament, B'nai B'rith circulated a petition calling on the expedited release of government documents pertaining to the Holocaust. That is commendable. I don't think anyone here actually thinks that's not a good idea. We want to know, and if there are actually collaborators or anyone involved in Canada, I think they should be put to trial. But what did the B'nai B'rith do as well? In the same petition, they snuck in a provision calling for the adoption of era. That is reprehensible. They have no credibility if they insist on linking the two. So, examples for those of you who don't know of anti-Semitism cited by era definition contains language that is racist towards Palestinians. That's what we should call it. By depicting criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic. Many universities, by the way, including UCL in the UK and University of Toronto in Canada, have deemed era unfit for adoption. So my question is the following to Ms. Robinson. Will Canadian education, and to all Canadian education officials, will Canadian education officials listen to experts at public universities or lend their ears to Zionist lobby groups like B'nai B'rith and CIJA? Will Canadian school curricula be dictated by principles of progressive pedagogies that incorporate anti-racist education, including, of course, the education on the Holocaust, and one would hope as well histories of other genocides around the world? Or will these curricula be subject to political interference and framed in a manner that will demonize criticism of Israel and depict it as anti-Semitic for students in grade 7 and 8, so that they can eventually fail to understand and see the cause of Palestinian liberation? So I want to be clear as I wrap up. Sorry, I keep moving, it's a slow one. Let me be clear. Any mandated school education or updated university policy that refers to Israel necessarily involves Palestine. You cannot speak about Israel and tell us to basically cease to speak under the unfortunate weaponization of anti-Semitism. You want to detach the two, that's fine. But we decide, and we, I mean Palestinian people, people of Arab background, peoples are suffering, what anti-Palestinian racism is. If you want to speak about Israel, you're automatically involving them, so that you cannot actually silence them in that respect. So, will Ottawa, BC, and UBC governments publicly commit to guaranteeing that anti-Palestinian racism is also institutionalized in educational material that make reference to Israel? This is the heart of the matter we're facing today. The Orwellian prohibition and silencing of pro-Palestine speech under false pretenses of violation of hate speech. I'll say that one more time. This is the heart of the matter, the Orwellian prohibition and silencing of pro-Palestinian speech under false pretenses of violations of hate speech. So long as CIJA, B'nai B'rith, and Hillel self-identify with Israel, they cannot pretend that their lobbying is not a form of foreign political interference. And so long as they are as such, they must be subject to questioning. No Hasbara tactics will change that, or intimidate us, or make us change our mind about speaking on this issue. If these organizations are genuine about fighting hate speech, they should stop weaponizing anti-Semitism to bully, intimidate, harass, and threaten the physical safety, mental well-being, and professional future of students who are speaking out about Palestine. As conscientious educators, we have a duty to oppose this interference and to defend and support students who are subject to it. Scholars United will never be silenced. While we push back against this crackdown, we must not forget, as many of my colleagues have reiterated, our primary duty, because this is a way sometimes of shifting the debate from the real issue here. And it's so outrageous that it's happening at a moment when we are witnessing a genocide in Gaza. We must not forget that our primary duty during this tragic moment is to keep pressing for justice in Palestine. What we are facing at our universities, as serious as it is, pales in comparison to the all-out war on education and the people of Palestine in general that Israel is conducting in Gaza and the rest of historic Palestine. This has amounted to what has been referred to as scholasticide, the physical elimination of Palestinian scholars and teachers, including, I'm just naming a couple for recognition here, Professor Abdel Nasser As-Saqqa, and President of the University, his geographer, and President of the University College of Applied Sciences, Dr. Saeed Al-Zubda, along with his wife and children, who was killed during bombings. So, scholasticide, there's a scholasticide, the killing of scholars, and scholasticide, the destruction of the infrastructure of education system. Israel's genocidal war is also doing that. Hundreds of thousands of children who have been spared the tragic fate of many thousands killed under Israeli bombardment are living today in destitute conditions in Gaza, let alone deprived of education. Many of these children, by the way, are featured a lot in Arab media. Against all odds, I listen to them every day, every other day, yearning to return to class and to their schoolmates and to their playgrounds, even if Israel is not leaving any standing, including UN schools, which are being bombed while these children are there not for education, they're there as refugees. So even schools as a space of refuge is denied, not simply as a space of education. So I would say that although their stories are not being told, we must tell their stories. The best response to prohibiting Palestine is promoting Palestine. We will never forget, we will never stop sharing. Thank you.